Okay, well, the date is October 24th, 2025, and I'm doing episode 2. I started episode 1 yesterday, sort of like an introduction, reading the inside cover and the back page reviews of Final Judgment by Michael Collins Piper. And yesterday I read a bit about Michael Collins Piper, who he was, really just from his Wikipedia page, and a little bit about what I remembered of him. And I highly recommend him. He had a radio station which he broadcast from Washington, D.C., and it was syndicated. And like a lot of things now, is available in many places on the internet. Clips and long, hours long compilations of his radio show and interviews and things that he maybe did investigations into. And so you could say maybe some of the things that he recorded were like, I suppose, not exactly audio lectures, but some kind of dissertation, maybe even on things, you know. And I was looking to see whether there was an audiobook of Final Judgment read by the author, Michael Collins Piper. I haven't found one, but maybe it does exist. I don't know. These days, of course, people can fairly easily, it seems, well, maybe it's not easy, but they can get the fingerprint, as it were, of somebody's voice, the characteristics of it, and make audiobooks that are quite convincing with enough time and effort put into it, which even if he never recorded it himself, I bet you somebody could make a sort of AI version of Final Judgment as read by an AI version of Michael Collins Piper these days if they wanted to. But anyway, that's all by the by. I'm still not sure whether I'll read the whole book cover to cover, but I was considering in now this episode 2, I was considering, I suppose, just skipping to the centre, right, where there's photographic plates or whatever they call them in the 90s. I think this was first published in either 93 or 94. And it does kind of get to the heart of the matter, but I was having another look again today at just the intro, acknowledgements, things like this, and it's all brilliant. So I really kind of don't want to skip over that. We'll see as I go along. You know, if it looks like we're not going to make it right by its 22nd November, I might skip over a few things. But I think today what I'll do is read from, well, I'll start at the beginning, more or less, you know, the introduction. So Final Judgment, I'm just going to scroll through here now. The subtitle is The Missing Link in the JFK Assassination Conspiracy by Michael Collins Piper. And it's America First books, you know, so just like Make America Great Again, it wasn't an invention or a phrase that was coined by Donald Trump. It was used by Ronald Reagan as a campaign slogan, Make America Great Again, and America First. Neither was something that Donald Trump thought up. It's just like all these political phrases, they sound good to every generation. We keep voting. And nothing ever changes, you know. It's just the aspiration is always there. And then, ironically enough, you know, I hear many people these days, kids, I say, you know, I've turned into an old lad, an old man, without my realizing how it was happening, because I suppose it happens to everyone. It happens so gradually, you don't realize it until you're old already. And so I'm trying to adjust to being an old man and hearing these young people talking about the 90s as if they were the rare old days, the good old days when everything was good and America was great. But it wasn't, and I wasn't. I was born in 1975, so I was born 12 years after JFK was shot. And, you know, when I was a child, like growing up in the mid to late 70s and early 80s and onwards, and into the 90s when I was a teenager and early 20s in the 90s, I think. Yeah, after 95. And I have to do the mental calculus. The internet wasn't really a thing. It didn't start becoming mainstream until the late 90s anyway, only starting to go into people's homes. And you'd still have to be an enthusiast. There was still no women on the internet by then. Anyway, let me not get into the old man tales. Practically speaking, that was true, more or less. But yeah, point is, anyway, even though it's only an aside, is that kids talk about the 90s as if everything was good then. It wasn't. And when I was a kid in the 70s, 80s, 90s, I didn't even think about JFK. I didn't really understand who he was. I heard he was an Irish American president, and all the Irish people were very thrilled that there was some kind of, if not exactly representation of Irish people there, that there was somebody to look up to, maybe to say, isn't that great? We could all aspire to one day, if we, I don't know, play our cards right or be good little boys, we could one day maybe grow up to be the president of the United States, and therefore by proxy of the free world or the Western world or whatever, the most important president or leader in the world. But if he can be gotten rid of so soon, and subsequent generations like myself, not as if we didn't know who he was, we'd heard of him, but it didn't really feature. I'll speak for myself. In my worldview, I was just a kid running and jumping, cycling, climbing trees, playing with my friends. I'd kind of heard of him. I'd heard that somebody shot him. Maybe I later heard that it was Lee Harvey Oswald. And I figured, right, he must have been a bad man that shot him. And I suppose, yeah, it happens when somebody's a leader, like the Pope. They take pot shots at you as well, even though the Pope, at the time, again, I thought Pope is the best guy in the world. So lovely, brilliant, good guy, perfect goodness. So all these things, only when you get much, much older, you realise aren't true. I do wonder whether there's a lot more people these days who are still in their 20s, a lot younger than I would have, started copping onto the world, realising that things that we were told in childhood or assumed in childhood weren't true at all our assumptions and all the little naive beliefs that we had. I get the impression maybe there's a lot more people in their 20s now who are aware of things, politically aware and aware of the world. Maybe they're learning much more quickly. I sometimes feel if I'd learned much more quickly, I could have avoided a lot of heartache and a lot of missteps in my life, maybe, But look, I didn't mean to reminisce too much, just maybe setting the stage a little bit, but I'll get on with it now. Wasn't sure if I was live there because OBS doesn't give you great feedback to let you know, but I see New Edge Designs is there, and so thank you very much for commenting. You've given me confirmation that I am live. I'm streaming simultaneously to Odyssey, as far as I know, as well as YouTube. And I'll check the comments on Odyssey a little bit later, maybe. But I'll just get on with this anyway. America First books, anyway, that's what made me think of that. And I'm reading from the sixth edition, which was reprinted in 2005, although I've seen variously that this was first published in either 1993 or 1994. So as I say, I was going to skip ahead to the dead center of this book, where there's some pictures that go along with some, I suppose, central themes of this book. But I think I'll maybe skip over this part here. I'm not sure. The big book, it says, on the JFK assassination. It just keeps getting bigger and better. The remarkable story of Final Judgment. The data which follows, it says, demonstrates the remarkable growth of this unusual volume as it has evolved since it was first published. Okay, so maybe he's added a few bits to it. Certain little revisements or minor details or corrections, just in spelling I saw later. But anyway, the first edition, it says, published in January of 1994. So maybe that's why sometimes you see 1993. There might have been advance copies out prior to January 94. Oh, fair enough. So it says originally it was 335 pages in length, featuring an all black cover, and was documented with 677 footnotes. Well, on this PDF anyway, there's something like 760 odd pages, I think. The third edition, it says, a Final Judgment, released in 1995, was revised, updated, now included an index with additional appendix. A who's who of the JFK conspiracy and other data was expanded to 385 pages with 746 footnotes. Okay, fourth edition was 1998, expanded to so this was a big expansion, then expanded to 672 pages, including 26 pages of photographs and other new material, such as a new introduction by the author and 8 additional appendices. More footnotes, featured an extended new question and answer section. The cover of this volume, similar to the covers of the 5th and 6th editions, featured photographs of a number of players in the JFK conspiracy. Okay. 5th edition, July 2000, grand total of 760 pages. More footnotes. And wrapping everything into that as well then. Incorporates data from previous editions. Some important factual information added. Okay. Some deletions of subheadings to accommodate important factual information. Okay. This volume is the second printing of the 6th edition and includes a number of textual additions not appearing in the first printing of the 6th edition. Okay. So the author hopes, or continues to hope, this will be his last word on the subject. Okay, well, I know the feeling. There's always a last thing you forget to say, or you forget to add in anything you write, or any live stream you might speak. I wish I would have remembered to say this. So there's always that feeling that you never quite did your best work, but imperfections have to do. There's always a balance between perfection, which you'll never achieve, and getting something out and done anyway. So there's A. Hello to A in Australia, I think. It says, didn't get a notification. Well, I mean, maybe it goes that way sometimes. I did create this in YouTube Studio. And I think I just gave it something like either a half an hour or 20 minutes notice. So, well, sure, you know. I'm going to try to do one very regularly now. If not daily, I'm going to really try to do one. I use as much time as I can between now and November 22nd. So that, hopefully, with luck, I haven't backwards or reverse read it and timed it. But I'm just hoping that, you know, fate or things will work in my favour so that I might be coming to a crescendo, at least with things, by November 22nd, I think will be the 62nd anniversary of JFK's assassination. So yeah, I'll skip over this part here about that there, but I'll read this about the cover. This may be the most unusual cover of any book, he says, and you can see that the cover there to the left there, the stream. He says, this may be the most unusual cover of any book, and there have been many published about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. But then again, Final Judgment, like its cover, is extraordinary. The figures shown left to right are Meyer Lansky, the head of the Global Organized Crime Syndicate. And again, like, I mean, just saying the Global Organized Crime Syndicate, you think, oh, no, that's only in movies, like, you know, James Bond or, you know, Spectre or Mersh, or is it Mersh, Smersh? I forget. Anyway, but the funny thing is that all this fictionalized stuff are things that have been presented to us as fiction. It's not. It's yes, it could be predictive programming. Or just get a big psychological operation to get us to think that when we hear about these things in real life, we say, you've been watching too many movies. You're a conspiracy theorist, or you're crazy, you're confusing fantasy or fiction, or, you know, thriller fiction with real world stuff. It's not like that in the real world. Whereas truth is usually not just stranger than fiction, but more horrific and more criminal than the fiction we read about. And less entertaining and more likely to provoke despair and fury, you know, than intrigue and amazement kind of thing, you know. But anyway, just clicked there to get a little update there to see now. OBS, I don't know if it's lack of my ability to use it or not, but now I'm seeing stats to confirm that I'm alive, or that I'm streaming live. Anyway, continuing with this here. Meyer Lansky, the head of the Global Organized Crime Syndicate, doesn't give it a name, but maybe it's best for now to leave it nameless. David Ben-Gurion, the Israeli prime minister who resigned his post in 1963, supposedly or ostensibly, or this is the story they told us anyway, disgusted with President John F. Kennedy's refusal to support Israel's drive to build a nuclear arsenal. And James J. Angleton, who in 1963 was the CIA's Director of Counterintelligence and head of the CIA's liaison desk for Israel's intelligence agency, the Mossad. By the way, I'll mention that if you go to my Odyssey, you'll find a live stream which I recorded the audio from. Actually, it's an X-Space, so there's no video as such. But I recorded the audio and I did a little bit of post-processing to balance a lot of imbalance in volume between the different voices. And it's on my Odyssey. You'll find it on Rumble as well. John Kiriakou, I don't know if any of you have heard of him. If you haven't, he's well worth listening to. I do believe that he is a member of the tribe, but who knows, maybe one of the good ones. But anyway, he worked for the CIA, and Mossad tried to recruit him. This is what he says. And he refused. They didn't take kindly to that. I think he also whistle blew on several things. He took a moral objection to some of the things that he was asked to do or that the CIA was doing that he was aware of. And he said that in this space, and he has said as much in other spaces, I reposted another interview that I listened to with somebody else I wasn't familiar with, but I reposted, or however you sort of, I think it's called reposting on Odyssey, so you'll find it if you go to my channel as well on Odyssey, where he talks more about his experience in the CIA and with the Mossad, and the things the Mossad would do to CIA to exert their dominance over the CIA. It's fascinating. I mean, it seems so obvious now in retrospect, but I mean, you can't trust everything that he would say, of course. But anyway, it's just a fact that he says that, in his opinion, the CIA was always Mossad's bitch. Which is just damning, It's just incredible. And it rings true. It does seem to be the case. It's borne out from what we see. Anyway, what is it there? A says, Meyer played a big part in getting the USA into World War II. Right, yes, that rings a bell, all right. And the sort of what they called, anyway, the American... I can't say that it begins with N and ends. I think a lot of the kids say Yahtzee. Just, I don't want to self-censor, but at the same time, I just think maybe early on in the stream, I don't want to say too many words, maybe, all around the same time. But Meyer gangsters bashed the fash. Yes, they did. It's been the same every generation. Like, whether they call themselves literally Antifa or whatever, either in Germany or the USA back then, it was the same types of people, and in many cases the fathers and mothers and grandfathers and grandmothers of the same people now, and I don't know if some of you saw there that Trotsky's, I think, granddaughter, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's grandson who had a sex change. It looks like that, or else it's a particularly ugly woman, who I think is the head of something like, in America, something like the drug ethics counselor, the drug ethical research counselor, something like that. I'm probably getting the name wrong, but, some kind of drug ethics and drug research ethics type committee, and did some work, experimentation on drugs, I think, in South America somewhere. How to make drugs that would, make people fitter, happier, more productive type stuff, But of course, it's just obviously researching how to make the drugs more potent and how to make people more addicted to them. I mean, if you've got a head on your shoulders at all, you know what these people are up to. So it's Trotsky's great-great-granddaughter or grandson, whichever the case may be, And it's just amazing that these people are hidden in plain sight. But anyway, I'll read this on here anyway, without, again, going off on too many other tangents. So, yeah, apparently, anyway, he was disgusted with President John Kennedy's refusal to support Israel's drive to build a nuclear arsenal. And James J. Angleton, who in 1963 was the CIA's Director of Counterintelligence, the head of CIA's liaison desk for Israel's intelligence agency, the Mossad. Over Angleton's shoulder is the logo of the Central Intelligence Agency that's on the book cover there. In the background, of course, is a nuclear explosion. Israel achieved its nuclear weapons capabilities precisely because of the assassination of President Kennedy. And so did Red China. These were was it the Rosenbaums that gave it to USSR? Did they give it to China as well? Anyway, or was it just called Rosens? All of the frightening details appear in the pages of all of the frightening details appear in the pages of Final Judgement. That's this book that we're reading from. At the bottom are shown Attorney General Robert Kennedy and President Kennedy and their father. Ambassador Joseph P. Kennedy, founder of the Kennedy family's would-be dynasty. John Kennedy's assassination ended any possibility of another Kennedy reaching the White House. And to the left is the logo of Israel's Mossad. And, it does seem to be the case that it's now a matter of record, or it can be seen that the motto of the Mossad is "By deception we will wage war," or more or less it translates as that, and it's a passage from is it from the Old Testament? I can't quite remember. Ulick says, and the formation of the FDA. Was she involved in that? Okay, thanks, Ulick. He says, 100% elect another Catholic and see what happens. Yeah. Now, I do remember hearing something about it. Maybe it's going back to my childhood. Maybe hearing that, people were concerned that having a Catholic president would mean that he mightn't be impartial. He might be too partisan towards either Catholics, Roman Catholics, or maybe even Irish people. But nobody ever seems to have the same concerns about what if all the politicians are bribed and blackmailed by the same types of people. I won't say the religion, but we know it, right? Just yet, we'll just move on, because I'm streaming on YouTube, and I just think it's important not to say, as I say, too many of the words. But you can guess which religion it is. I think we all know. The world's waking up to it. Anyhow, maybe I'll read this dedication here. He says, "To my late friend Lois Peterson. Without Lois, this book would simply not have been possible. Thanks, Lois," he says, "for everything. To the remarkable O.W. MacLeod," that's MacLeod. Does anybody know who Lois Peterson is? Isn't that funny that Lois Peterson, isn't that the name of the character in... Oh no, that's Lois Griffin. I'm thinking of Peterson, but anyway, no, strike that. Anyone here or know who O.W. MacLeod is, whose friendship and encouragement were most valued? And to Robert M. Piper, I take it that's a relative of his, if not brother or somebody like that, who shared my enthusiasm for seemingly lost causes. It sounds very sad, doesn't it? Kind of heartbreaking there. And to the gutsy and inimitable Jim Floyd. Anybody know who these people are? I suppose I should have looked them up. Ulick says, "Remember, they were always selected." Yes, indeed. And look, I keep hearing that, their father, what was his name there? Joseph P. Kennedy, that he wasn't a good guy, that he was unscrupulous in his business dealings, cutthroat, not a very moral guy. I don't know. I really don't know much about him, to be honest. And I remember I did mention there yesterday, J.C. Owens used to, whether he knew anything particular or not, he was sort of saying, always remember, like you were saying there, Ulick, that just because they, in their criminal cabal shot him, doesn't mean that he wasn't also a member of either their cabal or an affiliated secret society, He just had become a problem for the corporation, the global crime syndicate sort of thing, maybe, I'm happy to leave that question open as well, or certainly open to consideration. A there says, the Good Shepherd movie shows a good scene of how the Protestants rule. The rest are visitors. Yeah, although now the Protestants don't. I don't think any Christians do. I think maybe some Christian evangelicals or Christian Zionists think that they're on the winning team, or don't really think about exactly what they're doing or why, but I think they are owned and controlled by that one that I'm not mentioning just now. And I also think that the Catholic Church is owned and controlled as well, and maybe always was, by the you-know-whos. And I think I pretty much have come to the acceptance that, if not a conclusion, I accept that the Catholic or Christian Church was always just a schism of the you-know-whos anyway, and it was never about bringing anybody closer to God, but just solidifying power, and whoever it was that was against the kings and queens of Europe wanted to, become an emperor. I think that's, anyway. Look, I won't get into that because it's not only a tangent, but it's a controversial and how to say, like, it's a distracting tactic. I don't want to get off on that. I was going to say divisive, but look, this subject matter is divisive enough, I suppose, as it is. But I think there won't be too many people who will disagree that the official narrative, anyway, is not the right one. That's lies. But so this one, anyway, even though it's a sort of a fairly standard one by now, it might even seem old hat. It's very useful to examine the details of it, I think. So that's why I'm doing it, leading up to 22nd of November. Just before I go on here, A says, JFK's brother was killed in, I take it that's when JFK bro killed in WW2 bomber accident. Kennedy coincidence. Oh. Okay. I'm thinking of John F. Kennedy Jr. in that plane crash, which was that around 1991? It was prior, of course, to September 11th, 2001, but it was sort of a biplane or a small Cessna or something like that. Was it around the Hudson River? I can't remember. Anyway, Hudson Bay. Can't quite remember. I'll get on with this anyway. Cheers. Right, so for 10 years, Israeli propagandists called Final Judgement author Michael Collins Piper a liar, in quotation marks, and get ready for it, anti-Semite, for charging that Israeli intelligence played a role in the JFK, even just a role, right, in the JFK assassination conspiracy, because of JFK's bitter secret conflict with Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion over Israel's efforts to build nuclear weapons of mass destruction. Certain self-styled JFK assassination researchers, in inverted commas there, scoffed at Piper and refused to address the thesis of his book. However, on July 25th, 2004, many of Piper's critics were red-faced and silent when Israel's respected Jerusalem Post carried a story headlined, Vanunu, Israel behind JFK assassination. And this is the thing. I wish I'd realised this much sooner in my life. If you really want to know what's going on, read the Israeli newspapers. There's a few of them, like the Haaretz, or Haaretz, however you pronounce it, and Jerusalem Post, and there was something else there as well. I can't think of it now, but I think it was Jerusalem in the title. So yeah, you really need to read, and it's a good rule of thumb as well, always read the books published by people who you at least might even just think that you're ideologically opposed to, right? If they publish it, it's worth reading, even if you think it's a crock of lies. It could be very interesting to get an insight into, just a lot of things by just reading what they put out, even if you should treat it with a certain degree of circumspection anyway. Ulick there says JFK Jr.'s brother was killed in a drug overdose. Really? Because, I mean, obviously Robert Kennedy Jr., RFK Jr., the one who is now the whatever health secretary or whatever the title is, he was a drug addict as well for quite a while, wasn't he? As well as a sex addict, and possibly still is. I don't know. But am I misremembering now, or was RFK Jr. a drug addict for quite a while as well? I don't know. And whether it is or not, still, who knows? Anyway, I'll get on with this here. So they scoffed at Piper and refused to address the thesis of his book. However, on July 25th, 2004, many of Piper's critics were red-faced and silent when Israel's respected Jerusalem Post carried a story headlined Vanunu. Israel is behind the JFK assassination. Yeah, the newspaper reported that famed Jewish-born nuclear physicist Dr. Mordecai Vanunu, recently released after spending 18 years in prison for exposing Israel's covert atomic weapons program, had charged that supporters of Israel's drive for nuclear weapons were involved in the JFK assassination precisely because of JFK's interference with their ambitions. The Israeli government dismissed Vanunu's allegations, but what he said received attention in newspapers worldwide, with the notable exception of the United States, where one and only one newspaper mentioned Vanunu's charges, and that was the American Free Press, the Washington-based weekly that published Final Judgment. Wow. I mean, look, I guess I wasn't paying attention then. I don't know. Or I didn't care. Particularly, I figured, well, if JFK, as I say, was shot 12 years or so, or thereabouts, before I was born, it was all in the past. It was in the black and white days. What did I care? Maybe colour was slightly coming in then, but I just figured anything that happened in those black and white days, it was just history. History is boring. History is irrelevant. That is, I guess, what I thought. When I was still in my 20s, I probably still thought that in my 30s and 40s, maybe. Because I sort of said, well, look, even if stuff did happen then, all those people are dead and buried. So why would it ever affect me or affect anything? But, oh boy, how wrong I was, of course, you know. But if nothing else, I mean, it just proves there who owns and always has owned the media, the press in the United States. If there's only one newspaper, and it seems it was aptly named, the American Free Press, that reported on what was being written about the JFK assassination in Israel. Incredible, isn't it? However, it goes on, as widely read internet writer Reverend Mark Dankoff, that's D-A-N-K-O-F, put it quite correctly, the Vanunu Piper allegations about Israel will not go away. Wow. New evidence is the subtitle here. New evidence ties Israel's nuclear weapons program to the New Orleans connection in the JFK conspiracy. I remember reading as well, I mean, maybe it's common knowledge to you, but it was, I think it was Michael Hoffman wrote about how not only was there the planning of the assassination in New Orleans, that, you know, certain members of a cabal that conspired to kill him met up to plan it in New Orleans, but that there was a sort of a supernatural reason for it, that there was names of places where maybe a house or a street that they colluded at, that all are part of a grand sort of how did he put it? Not exactly subterranean. Maybe the word is chthonic or something like this. I did a video on it now, but it was more than a year ago, and I kind of maybe forget some of the details. I must republish it. In any case, to do with sort of pulling spirits up out of the ground in a sort of a black magic type of ritual, where the names and places of where they conspire to do these dastardly deeds play a not just important but necessary, a vital role in allowing their evil plans to come to fruition. Almost like that they are blessed by a sort of an underground evil spirit, if you know what I mean. The devil, if you like, or whatever, you know. Because these people are, in a manner of speaking, and maybe also literally, satanic. That they worship and are protected and blessed by sort of a dark power or dark forces. It's out there, but I think that it's valid anyway. Ulick says JFK Jr. is playing the real life role of the Truman Show. Yeah, I think there's validity in that for everyone, really, to a greater or lesser extent. This world is a lot stranger, I think, than we'd like to think, or certainly than we're led to believe. A says Aussie Prime Minister Harold Holt also went for a swim in the same era. I see. Okay. Yeah, these people will remove people off the chessboard as soon as they're not even maybe inconvenient, but as soon as they've outlived their usefulness, to tie up loose ends even. A says Harold Holt was all the way with LBJ during the Vietnam War. I see. Well, it sounds like then he might not have been a very nice fellow if he thought LBJ was somebody to hitch his wagon to in a complete way like that. I'm not sure if I'm familiar at all with Harold Holt. But yeah, LBJ seems to have been a nasty bag of tricks. And so I'm guessing Harold Holt, if he thought LBJ was a great guy, he maybe wasn't such a good guy himself. Maybe he got his just comeuppance, if that's what you're saying there. I don't know. Interesting. I must look into that a bit more. Or afterwards, I mean. Look into it at all after this. Sounds interesting. Cheers, A. So anyway, as the second printing of the 6th edition of this book went to press, a source with intimate high-level knowledge about the NUMEC, that's NUMEC in capitals, I presume it's an acronym. Must look up that now. Maybe I will. NUMEC nuclear plant in Pennsylvania that smuggled nuclear material. It's spelled MATERIEL. So there's a subtle difference there between material and materiel. It's sort of a French way of saying it. And I'm not sure what the distinction is, though, when it's printed in English like that. Yeah, right. Maybe it means consignment or, you know, a variety of material. I don't know. Or unknown material, unspecified in a slight way. That's the context I've always read it in, I think. But anyway, it smuggled nuclear material. Maybe it's also got some kind of consignment, ambassadorial consignment, or that kind of thing going on with it, or diplomatic immunity type thing. I don't know. Anyway, nuclear material to Israel. See Chapter 8. Right, we might get to that. Maybe not today, though. Provided documentation to Michael Collins Piper that the family of Edith Rosenwald, that's Rosenwald, Edith Rosenwald Stern, Stern. So double-barreled surname maybe. Edith Rosenwald Stern, a prominent New Orleans Jewish leader. I'm just reading the words on the page here. Were key financiers behind NUMEC. Mrs. Stern was the closest friend of Clay Shaw, the long-time CIA asset charged by New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison in the JFK conspiracy. Final Judgement had already documented Shaw's ties to Israeli intelligence, so the NUMEC-Stern connection is all the more damning and, with other data, explains why Garrison ultimately concluded that there was an Israeli connection behind the conspiracy. And note this. Another NUMEC investor was Pittsburgh's CIA-connected right-wing, it says in inverted commas, or air quotes. I take it means what's what's the distinction here? Is he really right wing? As I think we've learned now with all the politicians, whether they are nominatively right conservatives or Republicans, rhinos, Republicans in name only, or Dinos, even Democrats in name only. It does the distinction is without a difference and always has been, because they're all bought and paid for, bribed and blackmailed sufficiently by AIPAC. So what does it matter whether they're right wing or left wing? It's all a distinction without a material difference, because they're all beholden to these billionaires, right? Jim Scaife or Scaff, Scaife is the name here, whose protege Joe Farah, Farah. I wonder, is Farah? I know Farah Fawcett. She can't have been. Look, I don't know. No, I hope not. I don't want to know. Oh God. Anyway, whose protege Joe Farah, a vocal supporter of Israel, promoted a JFK conspiracy book evidently designed to distract attention from Final Judgment. Yeah, they do this a lot. They poison the information well, and you'll see it a lot with SEO, the search engine optimization. They'll fill Google and Bing and all the other search engines, even the ones we think that are free from this sort of stuff. They'll get somebody to write a book of the same name, even as some other book, or a movie that's the same name as a much better movie that actually contains some useful information, just so they can then pollute. It sounds crazy, but yeah, they'll go to all that expense just so they can pollute the search results enough so that anybody who doesn't know exactly what they're looking for will never find the thing that will yield good information, And if you think that's crazy, I mean, they'll take down planes or blow up whole buildings just to get one guy, and they treat all the rest as collateral damage. So they definitely will commission a movie, spend millions on it, if not billions even, or get somebody to write a book and pay him handsomely, just so that the book will serve as just a distraction. They don't even care if anybody reads it, but just so it's a distraction from the title, from something else that they want to put a smoke screen over. Anyway, another little title here. The Israeli nuclear weapons linked to the JFK assassination is a reality, a fact of history that is not going to go away. And I'm just going to satisfy my curiosity, and for anybody else who might not know what NUMEC stands for, I'm just going to look it up here. What is NUMEC? It says NUMEC, or this is Bing, or not Bing, Brave AI result here. It says NUMEC, or the Nuclear Materials and Equipment Corporation. So that's what the acronym stands for, NUMEC, Nuclear Materials and Equipment Corporation, was a facility located in Apollo, Pennsylvania. Well, there you go. Apollo, they always like to weave in these kind of classical, often Grecian names, but it's always going back to antiquity. I mean, they'll have a theme, and as you know, of course, the Apollo space program, the theme for all these things, Apollo, Artemis, and there's the Saturn rockets and everything else. They have these names as part of a theme, and it's not accidental, So Apollo, Pennsylvania is the name of the town, a facility located in Apollo, Pennsylvania, established in the late 1950s to produce components for nuclear weapons and process highly enriched uranium. And there's an acronym for that as well. I didn't know. You'd have to be using this term a lot. HEU, highly enriched uranium, under contract with the US Atomic Energy Commission, the AEC, for programs including the Navy's nuclear submarine fleet. The company became the centre of the Apollo affair, a 1965 incident involving the unaccounted loss of 200 to 600 pounds, that's 91 to 272 kilos or kilograms of HEU, with suspicions that the material was diverted to, and by the way, that's a huge amount to be transporting. You're not going to fit that in a suitcase, nor are you going to transport all of that at once. With one human being, of course. Like, you need heavy equipment to transport that, so special equipment. And I mean, even if you had a pickup truck, your suspension is going to show visible signs at the very least that it's carrying a heavy load. Anyhow, with suspicions that the material was diverted to Israel's nuclear weapons program, the FBI investigated Zalman Shapiro, NUMEC's president from 1965 to 1980, over the loss of 206 pounds, 93 kilograms of HEU, though no charges were ever filed. Zalman Shapiro. The tuning fork again going off, but look, I mean, no prizes for that one anyway, Shapiro's in government, and of course Ben Shapiro, probably the most famous one right now. But anyway, I think I'll read a bit more of this anyway. No charges were ever filed. Subsequent investigations by the CIA, the AEC, and later the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC, found that the losses were likely due to unaccounted for mechanisms such as just like gradual loss, such as contamination of worker clothing, losses from scrubber systems, and residual deposits in equipment. Don't worry about it. All of those little tiny dust particles that were being lost through inefficiencies have added up to 272 kilos. Right, yeah, sure. Residual deposit equipment, with one investigator stating there was no evidence Shapiro was guilty. No evidence. They're so brazen, with such chutzpah. They're literally caught with their hand in the cookie jar saying, no, these cookies only went missing because of crumbs spilling out of the jar through continual use, Goy. Despite these findings, the NRC refused to clear Shapiro of suspicion in 2009, citing a lack of definitive proof that material was not diverted. The site's waste disposal area remains under cleanup by US Army Corps of Engineers, with excavation scheduled to begin in 2021 and an estimated project duration of 10 years. Right, so we won't find out until 2031. Due to extensive contamination. Isn't that useful and handy for them? NUMEC employees are included in the Special Exposure Cohort. Right, the acronym for that is SEC. Right, different SEC, not the Security and Exchange Commission. Under the Energy Employees Occupational Illness Compensation Program Act, the EEOI-CPA, recognising their increased risk of cancer from occupational exposure to hazardous materials. The incident has also inspired fictional works, including a reference in the movie The Sum of All Fears and the book The Fifth Horseman, which depict the alleged diversion of nuclear material to Israel. Okay. Right, getting back to this here anyway. JFK and Israel. No special friendship in air quotes. So, in quotation marks, this is a quote from Washington Jewish Week, October 9th, 1997. Israel need not apologize for the assassination or destruction of those who seek to destroy it. The first order of business for any country is the protection of its people. Right, and as we know, they consider, and they say it to us and they get us to accept it as well, the best defense is a strong offense. So they consider themselves morally justified if they want to get rid of anybody. Assassinate anyone if they can somehow, through a series of twisted steps of logic, at least to pretend to convince themselves that they're protecting their people by assassinating whoever they want. Here's a quote here from Reuven or Reuven Pedatzer. So it's REUVEN PEDATZER in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz. There's an apostrophe there between the two A's, but you don't see it, I think, in the print anymore. So whether it's Haaretz or Haaretz, February 5th, 1999, reviewing Israel and the bomb. New York, Columbia University Press, 1998, and the quote is, "The murder of American President John F. Kennedy brought to an abrupt end the massive pressure being applied by the US administration on the government of Israel to discontinue the nuclear program. In Israel and the Bomb is the title I think maybe Avener is the publishing house. Cohen, Cohen, demonstrates at length the pressures applied by Kennedy on Ben-Gurion, in which Kennedy makes it quite clear to the Israeli Prime Minister that he will, under no circumstances, agree to Israel becoming a nuclear state. The book implied that, had Kennedy remained alive, it is doubtful whether Israel would today have a nuclear option. And it was not an option for them, they say, to not have a nuclear option. Nothing in the universe is coincidence. So this is quite a long quote here from Edward Klein, former editor-in-chief of the New York Times magazine, writing in the opening pages of The Kennedy Curse, is the title. The Kennedy Curse, published in New York by St. Martin's Press, 2003, who famously didn't want to publish one of David Irving's books once they discovered what a virulent anti-you-know-what he was, right? And there's a very interesting video, I think, of Charlie Rose holding a debate between some, I can't think of the other guy's name now, but anyway, it was Hitchens, Christopher Hitchens, and this other, well, Hitchens was a you-know-who, but was he a good one or not? I don't know. The other one, whose name I can't remember, but I think he might have been representing St. Martin's College, or St. Martin's Press, rather. But anyway, I'll read this quote here from Edward Klein, and again, Klein, K-L-E-I-N. It should be German, but is it really? Probably not. It probably rings like a tuning fork, you know? Nothing in the universe is coincidence. Rabbi Meir, or Meyer, M-E-I-R, it's spelled, Yeshurun, S-E-Y-E-S-H-U-R-U-N, of the Kabbalah Center in Boca Raton, Florida, told a reporter for the Palm Beach Post. Somebody in the Kennedy family did something to open the family to this negative energy, and that has been plaguing the Kennedys for decades. Now, to me, that's an admission that what they've said is, we put essentially a satanic curse on him, but he did it. It was his fault, right? Somebody in his family must have done something that angered our gods, or our God, which is Satan, or whatever name it goes by, you know. That's my commentary anyway. According to a story that is told in mystical Jewish circles, Kabbalist, right? JFK's father, Joseph Kennedy, returned to the United States aboard an ocean liner that was also carrying Israel Jacobson, spelled I-S-R-A-E-L, Israel Jacobson, a poor Lubavitcher rabbi, as in Lubavitch, you know, a poor Lubavitcher rabbi, which, as far as I understand, look, I mean, I remember looking at it before, isn't it something Lubavitch? Was the name of some guy who set up a Kabbalistic sect in Russia. I can't remember, but I'm going to guess it was sometime in the late 19th century, late 1800s, I guess. And I think that how it got to New York was because, and wasn't it? It was a Lubavitch head office in New York 2 years ago, roughly, when they discovered the tunnels underneath there with the mattress and the children's toys and high chairs and things like this under. Is it Brooklyn? And the tunnels going under the street and all this sort of stuff. Anyhow, I think that's the Lubavitch Center there. So I think it was supposedly after the supposed pogroms in Russia that these Russian, are they called Orthodox Jays? Whatever they are, anyway, I think it's, you know, some kind of Orthodox sect of Kabbalist Jays got boats then over to New York. And I've seen video footage of them in black and white, maybe clips of it on X maybe particularly, but I'm sure it's on every site, of them arriving in New York. And even then, people in New York saying, uh-oh, here comes trouble. even though they were ostensibly refugees fleeing persecution, as is always the way, A says, Chris defended David's right to free speech and then got knocked. Okay. Anyway, continuing with this quote here anyway. So Israel Jacobson, a poor Lubavitcher rabbi on the same ship as Joseph Kennedy, the patriarch of the Kennedy family, and 6 of his yeshiva students who were fleeing the Nazis. A notorious anti-Semite, Kennedy, well, that's what brought it on him then. That's what brought this plague onto the family. A notorious anti-you-know-what, Kennedy complained to the captain that the bearded, black-clad Jews were upsetting the first-class passengers by praying on the Jewish high holy day of Rosh Hashanah. In retaliation, or so the story goes, Rabbi Jacobson put a curse on Kennedy, damning him and all his male offspring to tragic fates. Isn't this, it really is, it's exactly witchcraft, wizardry, that we like to believe only exists in fairy tales, or we might laugh at this and kind of say, we're not superstitious like that at all. But these people really believe in it, and I'm going to say that I was wrong about so many things and dismissed so many things when I was younger, that I think a few years ago I decided, I can no longer sort of read this kind of thing and go, as if, and laugh, heartily like that, or laugh haughtily. I don't take this sort of stuff unseriously anymore. So in retaliation, or so the story goes, Rabbi Jacobson put a curse on Kennedy, damning him and all his male offspring to tragic fates. It is a curious fact that the very same people who scoff at the concept of kismet, I only learned that word, or so, maybe I only saw it coming up a lot recently, or people using it recently enough, but it's sort of a Hebrew word for fate, or whatever you might say, could translate it as destiny, or could translate it as serendipity, or a confluence of events, or there could be a good aspect to it, where things work out for the best, or every person has a sort of a type of a life path where their life path intersects with whatever they need at the right time. Sort of a fortunate happening or coincidence of events. Depends on your perspective, of course, doesn't it? So anyway, kismet, Kismet, or fate. Find it difficult to dismiss the concept of curses. The Kennedy family made the fatal mistake of thinking of themselves as divine. Or like gypsies, right? And there's a lot of very much commonality and similarity between the gypsies, Roma gypsies, whether they might have came from Egypt, or whether they might have come from, maybe someplace, at least if not around northern India or towards the Indian subcontinent or thereabouts, or somewhere in the Middle East, or as I hear a lot of people now, and politically correct, I hear them a lot trying to call it West Asia, which is ridiculous, isn't it? But these things happen as the West is in decline and loses its power, it loses its world dominance, and losing any kind of political right to call the rest of the world and have the rest of the world follow, But wherever exactly these kind of people come from, I do think it's become pretty clear now that Roma gypsies, these kind of dark people from whatever Indian continent or subcontinent, and whatever it was that supposedly, so the story goes, had their exodus from Egypt, that they all share very common traits in how they behave, and so quite likely that they are indeed, if not the same people, share common ancestors and genetics. I think a lot of people are coming to this discovery and realization, and it's quite earth-shattering. They have these kind of traditions like cursing people or putting gypsy curses on them for crossing them or for angering them, And it's bad fate for Joseph Kennedy that he happened to even be on the same ship as these Lubavitchers fleeing either whoever they said was persecuting them in Russia or Germany or whatever, you know. Yeah, there's something else, isn't it, that they call it? Not just Lubavitch, but something else. Lubavitch. I forget now at the moment. But anyway, maybe somebody can help me out in the chat. Motives is the subheading here. It is interesting, but not surprising, to note that in all the words written and uttered about the Kennedy assassination, Israel's intelligence agency, the Mossad, has never been mentioned. And yet a Mossad motive is obvious. On this question, as on almost all others, American reporters and commentators cannot bring themselves to cast Israel in an unfavourable light, despite the obvious fact that Mossad complicity is as plausible as any of the other theories. A helped me out there, by the way. It's Chabad Lubavitch, or Chabad Lubavitch, Chabad. Thank you very much. So, yeah, even though the Mossad motives and the complicity is plausible and obvious, the fact that they cannot bring anybody, commentators cannot bring themselves to cast Israel in an unfavourable light. This quote comes from former Republican Paul Findley, Republican in, it says I-11, or is that supposed to be ILL, like Illinois? In the Washington Report on Middle East Affairs, March 1992. I wrote a message there, but I didn't get a time to see what it is. So, just want to check something here now. I don't know if it's just my bit rate that I'm getting a warning about. I think maybe that's all it is. I don't know why. Yeah, I've got a bit rate of 2 kilobits. It's lower than the recommended bit rate. Right, okay. I think it's fine anyway. I'll leave the bit rate alone. Now, 1 second. Sorry for the delay here. I minimized something, but I wanted to close it, I think. Look, I'll have to forget about it for now. On with this here anyway. Origins is the subtitle there. The Israeli origin should be totally covered, while attention should be shifted to any other possible factor. Yeah, so this is the way we notice this as well, right? They send us down any number of rabbit holes. They give us so much different theories to chew on, to provide smokescreen or a chaff and redirect, or just any number of mysteries to occupy ourselves with, to provide noise, so that the real thing that's going on, the Israeli connection or origin, should be masked or hidden amongst all the noise anyway, hidden in plain sight maybe. So this is from Benjamin Givli, Givli, head of Israeli military intelligence, outlining an Israeli terror campaign to be blamed upon Muslim extremists, documented during the inquiry into Israel's Lavon affair, Lavon. So that was one of the terrorist affairs that, or terrorist incidents that they did in, wasn't it still during British mandatory Palestine, so they could earn their independence or create their Israeli state. Wobbly Boost there says, I'm listening but doing stuff. Glad you're on, he says. Thank you very much, Wobbly Boost. Alan Hargreaves says, bros. Maybe that was in relation to something I was reading out there. Leibovitch bros, maybe was that it? Anyway. Players. There has been, since almost the earliest days of the Israeli state, and the earliest days of a CIA secret bond basically by which Israeli intelligence did jobs for the CIA and for the rest of American intelligence. You can't understand what's been going on with American covert operations and the Israeli covert operations until you understand this secret arrangement. That's Andrew Coburn on C-SPAN's Book Notes, September 1st, 1991. Well, as I said, Michael Kiriakou, the CIA whistleblower, I've got it on my Odyssey there if you want to look it up. In around the 20th minute, you'll see it in the thumbnail. I know I've put the quote there, but he says that as far as he was concerned, the CIA was always Mossad's bitch and did whatever they were told. He also said there, I reposted or shared, but you'll see it if you go to my videos published, an interview that he did recently with somebody else who, because the first one there is with Syrian girl in X, and then another interview there he did, I listened to there recently, where he said that the members of the Five Eyes, they can just, go around in CIA building and they sit at the same desk with, like, whether it's Australians, British, New Zealand, I don't know, whoever else, Canada, I suppose, they sit at the same desks with the CIA. Now, he claimed, I don't trust this guy who was speaking though, I think he said he claimed that the Mossad aren't allowed in the building. But this other, I think Michael Kiriakou then said, well, I mean, what I heard was that they were allowed to go to the Los Alamos and just take whatever information they wanted there and walk around freely. So I would tend to believe that, and I would say that maybe they make a pretense that they're not allowed in the building, but maybe they're just told from on high, you just do whatever we tell you to do, and you hand up whatever information you have, or just only investigate this, and they're told specifically don't investigate still any Israeli or Mossad or who-ish connections, Anyway, you'll find that on my Odyssey if you check to see. Oh, you'll find it in my Rumble if you find it there as well. Like, search for Eternal Extrapolations. So researchers. While the JFK assassination, researchers have involved themselves in consuming preoccupation with the microanalytic searching for facts of how the assassination was accomplished, there has been almost no systematic thinking on why President Kennedy was killed, of course. And I think a lot of people have realized this as well, that they get us all arguing and fascinated with all the details about where the bullet might have come from, or how many bullets there might have been, or how many shooters there might have been, and all this sort of stuff. Analysing the specific metallurgy of whatever casings were found, and all this kind of thing, and the angles of trajectory, and all this. But never the motivations, and never the who done it, rather than the how it was done. So the how it was done does serve as a huge distraction. Look over here, but not over there type thing, Concern all your investigative energies with the how it was done, but not the why and by whom. So that's very appropriate to everything these days. And as I said yesterday, many parallels to other assassinations. If we just say for the moment that it really did happen, that any of these really did happen. But so many parallels with the most recent one there of Charlie Kirk. So anyway, that is very useful insight, I think, from JFK researcher Vincent Salandria, Salandria, quoted by Daniel Brandt, Brandt, of Namebase Newsline is the title of the publication. Namebase Newsline report, January to March 1994. Alan Hargreaves says, Das Sau means the pig from Romania. Das Sau. D-A-S-S-O-W. Okay. Oh, if you say Mossad backwards. Okay. Interesting. Misinformation is the subtitle here, or a little heading title. There has been a lot of misinformation poured out. It is time for people to look in different directions. I don't really care who did it. I just want Lee to be exonerated if he is not the guilty party. Well, this is from Marina Oswald's, presumably the wife or if not related to him, maybe sister, I don't know, in Dick Russell's The Man Who Knew Too Much. So she just wants her husband or whoever exonerated. Illusions is the title here. There is a type of optical illusion known in its more pretentious manifestations as camouflage art. These are paintings, generally of wilderness landscapes, that, viewed up close, look like simple picturesque scenes. A mountain lake with snow-covered slope reflected on its surface, a field of wild flowers, a forest of birch trees. Take a few steps back, however, and the picture changes. The mirrored rock assumes the shape of an eagle in flight. The flowers form themselves into a rearing stallion. The boles of the birch trees become the profile of an Apache warrior. The myriad details resolve themselves into a single unmistakable image, previously hidden from sight, but only when they are seen from a distance. Yeah, I think, although this isn't quite what they're talking about, magic eye pictures are fascinating, just not just because of, the optical illusion, but because of, by metaphor, how for us to understand the big picture in history, in politics, in the human condition, in everything else, you have to take a very big step backwards. You have to step back so far, much further than most people ever want to do, to try and get a handle on what you're looking at. Most people are so focused up close on every aspect of their life that they never get to see anything in proper perspective, or with enough detail around what they're looking at to understand the nature of not just the thing, but the whole big picture. And with this kind of specific thing where the rock turns into the shape of an eagle and such like that, I've seen so many of these which are either computer or AI generated, or maybe assisted by people who are very clever that they can hide imagery and things that just look like very innocent pictures. And it does fool Grok and other AI. So very interesting. As I say, not just from a technical point of view and what they might be useful for to transmit information in a way that might get around certain kind of AI censorship, but also very useful as a metaphor for all of us as to how to go back 100 miles to see if you can kind of encompass enough into a picture to really see what's going on. So that's from Deranged is the title. Harold Schechter's, and that name rings a bell, Harold Schechter's study of serial killer Albert Fish. Yeah. Okay, so the subtitle here is Mirrors. The overwhelming evidence is that a conspiracy, a big conspiracy containing numerous levels of intrigue, led to the Kennedy assassination. Everywhere you look, there is another hall of mirrors. Over the years, it has become virtually impossible to see what the truth is. Where is the wizard, the wicked witch? Above all of the above, or none of the above, what ultimately faces us is a hydra-headed beast. But it is possible to come to grips, at least with its claws, always remembering that the intrinsic nature of this beast is fog and smoke. Nevertheless, this is not a wholly ambiguous and unknowable world. From Dick Russell's The Man Who Knew Too Much. Yeah, I don't think I've ever read it, but that's a very famous title. And I have to admit, I enjoyed a comedy movie with Bill, what was his name? He was in Ghostbusters. Lesser known comedy he was in called The Man Who Knew Too Little, which must have been riffing on that title. I really enjoyed that one there. But anyway, that there, the comment there on the Wicked Witch and the Wizard, the Hall of Mirrors, the Hydra-headed beast, all of these things are metaphors. And you maybe you don't see the whole beast, but you at least come to grips with its claws. The fog and the smoke. It puts me in mind, and I think it might come up later if I get to it. Maybe I won't get to it today, but William Grimstad and Michael Hoffman and Shelby Downard, what was his name? fully, I can't think of his first name now. But anyway, Shelby Downard, those three guys, they all, I think, looked into, they were all, of course, called virulent, anti-you-know-whatites. But they all looked into this sort of dark and occult and hidden ritual, Kabbalistic aspect to all of this, to the JFK assassination. And, it really rang true with me that it doesn't make the whole thing fantastical and ambiguous. It just helps you to know it in a way that is, it's terrifying but fascinating, and it sort of opens up a third dimension to really come to grips with this thing, and how they plan it, and how there's all these coincidences, how things are called, the names of the places where things happened, and everything else. I did a video on some aspect of that there, a couple of videos on it, and maybe in this live stream I'll put them in a pinned comment or something later, so if you haven't seen it, or even if you have, you can go back and look at it with fresh eyes. It's sort of like a journey into this kind of, it is weird, but it's not totally ambiguous, but there's an ambiguity to it, a sort of a floatiness to it, but it's not unknowable. I think it helps you to know it better. I know that's all a bit vague. I'll move on. Bill Murray, thank you very much. Thanks for helping me out there, Krishnan, Bill Murray, and Wobbly Beast. Appreciate that. Oswald Mossad. Yeah, I see Krishnan is trying to see a connection there. Yeah, I can see that. Wobbly Boost says, I think I know which word we aren't allowed to say you're referring to. Yeah, look, it's just certain words. I don't want to be always self-censoring, but I just don't want to say them too often. I have said them once or twice, and I appear to have gotten away with them so far. But one thing I've noticed is that my live streams, I don't know if it's just a policy change that happened a while ago, or if it's just because I'm a small, less than 1,000 or whatever the threshold is of subscribers. But my live streams don't go to processing until 24 hours have gone by, and then they get processed. I don't know if it's because I've been given a sort of a black mark, and that they want to go through and create the transcript and then have AI go through it with a fine tooth comb or not, so they never tell you what exactly the thresholds for things are, but it's probably the case that if you mention something once or twice, you're all right. I'm guessing. If you mention it a few times, I'm like, oh, here, this guy is making his whole focus just this. Do you see what I mean? So, yeah, but we all know what we're talking about. You know what I mean? So that's anyway from Dick Russell's The Man Who Knew Too Much. I must see if I can find that book and at least skim through it. Magicians is the subtitle here. President Kennedy's assassination was the work of magicians. I'm fascinated now that Michael Collins Piper is very obviously somebody who's looked into this and was looking at this from that perspective as well, because most people would think, right, he must have been a lullabelle, totally crazy if he's believing in this stuff. But I'm going to say, from what I read of King Kill 33 by Shelby Downard, why can't I think of his first name? Like, when I read that, it read like the Protocols of the Learned Elders, Even if it sounds fantastical, it rings true now that you know what you know, Is it George Shelby Downard? I can't think of his first name. It doesn't sound quite right, but anyway. If anybody knows, you can remind me in the comments as well. So Alan Hargreaves says, whole new codes unlocked. Turn the word rem or mer upside down. Yeah. Oh yes, exactly. Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate that, Alan. Yeah. And I think all the letters, as I kind of realized a while ago, all of our letters do need to be turned to really see what they are. They're symbols. You need to look at them from every angle, from above, from below, from left, from right, from inside out, and everything. We kind of limit ourselves, and I think we have been deliberately limiting ourselves to only read things in a certain direction. I think we should read things from right to left as well, see what the other side is reading, you know. Anyway, the algorithm is fickle too. Innocent phrases get removed. Antagonistic, no words. Yeah, exactly. So look, I don't want to be overly ruining it by overly censoring, and I don't want to be always sort of censoring myself, but at the same time, I just want to not be too reckless either, you know. So that's the way it is. Yeah, appreciate what you're saying there, guys. Anyway, hope you're appreciating this. Magicians, look into it, and mermaids. Yeah, mer is the French for sea as well, so I appreciate that too. Women of the sea. Werewolves. Yes, mermaids, werewolves. Yeah. Magicians, anyhow. President Kennedy's assassination was the work of magicians. It was a stage trick, complete with accessories and false mirrors. And when the curtain fell, the actors and even the scenery disappeared. Well, that reminds me of that saying by Frank Zappa. You know, when the cost becomes too much, or they're just not bothered putting up a stage show or a theatre for us anymore, down will come the curtain and they'll show us the brick wall behind it of reality, or of the fictional reality we didn't realise or allowed ourselves to be deluded into thinking we lived in. So even the scenery disappeared, but the magicians were not illusionists, but professionals, artists in their way, yes. From Hervé Lamar's Farewell America. Well, that sounds like another great book as well, but as I say, completely rings true with King Kill by... I'll have to look it up now, so sorry. I just always have a bad memory for names. Shelby Downard. James Shelby Downard, King Kill 33. I must do a proper reading from start to finish of that. Maybe after this I'll do that then, from 22nd of November onwards maybe. So James Shelby Downard, King Kill 33. It's clear to me now that all of this sort of investigation into the black magic aspect of the JFK killing is something that Michael Collins Piper has definitely done. I'm sure of it now, you know. Okay, so here's what Australian-based JFK assassination researchers have to say about Final Judgment. I think I'll read this. Okay. Michael Collins Piper must be a glutton for punishment. Upon the first release of his book, Final Judgment, a storm of controversy erupted in the United States with certain pressure groups. I think we can guess who those are now. Or indeed, which particular one? Well, maybe it wasn't just AIPAC. Maybe it was also the ADL and the Southern Poverty Law Centre and these kind of guys. Certain pressure groups, he has in air quotes, trying hard to have the book banned. Since then, Final Judgment has gone through 3 more printings and the controversy hasn't abated. Wobbly Boost there says, there's good recommended reading from those quotes, but I no longer study this stuff. I'm happy to listen to you study this stuff. Yeah, well, look, I appreciate that. I like company in this as well. And to be honest, I don't have the patience to read every book now that I should have read when I was in my 20s, because I think we all know where we are. But what I do think is, it's important to revisit certain things from time to time and keep them in the zeitgeist. So that's my intention here with reading this book. And look, there's so many books that I could do live streams on or skim over. This one, though, I want to give extra attention to it, as I say, at least until the 22nd of November. So the controversy hasn't abated. No, not through all these different printings. And I don't want it to. I want... What I'm trying to avoid, I suppose, as well, is for people to just get to the stage where all has been revealed, which is their plan. And then, because it's been revealed, bit by bit, piecemeal, and slowly, over the years and generations, the people will just go, yeah, well, everyone knows. Look, who cares at this stage? You know, what's done is done. You can't change it now anyway. People become apathetic, myself included, but most other people who are like in the normie population, the people who are outside of, let's say, 10% of people who really care about this stuff, about justice, and that no matter how long it's been, even if we have to dig up some of these people, you know, from their graves to stand trial and then be hung, right? Or maybe not hung, but incarcerated, reanimated and incarcerated for the rest of their lives for the crimes they've done. Justice needs to be done for all this. And to be honest, you know, I don't want to run the risk that there's no God or no devil or no afterlife. I think that we should take care of justice in the here and now, in this mortal coil. So I guess my primary purpose here is to get ahead of the slow drip feed of information and get people realizing, like, quicker than their timetable allows for. And so that people will be still angry enough to say, we have righteous indignation and we want justice for this. Even though it might be delayed, we want it now, before it's too late, before everybody's in their graves. And we have to rely on hoping that there's a God to do it. You know, that's, to be honest, that's not good enough for me. Even if it was to happen, it's not good enough for me. And I want other people to be angry about this. And I think to maintain the righteous indignation, it's important to continue to prick your consciousness with the finer details of this sort of stuff, you know. Alan says, me too. I want justice as well. Yeah, and no, none of this passive. This is why I do disagree with Christianity as well. That people say, oh no, you have to leave judgment and justice and all that sort of stuff up to God or Jesus or, you know, all that sort of stuff. I do think that's a bad aspect of Christianity. The constant leaving it up to God, and God works mysterious ways, and, you know. And I don't think Jesus was a pacifist in that regard anyway. I think when Jesus was full of righteous indignation, he turned the tables over in the synagogue and all that. So I think a lot of cowards just look to the Bible and to, you know, some superficial aspects of Christianity to find an excuse to do nothing and leave the troublesome work of achieving justice to others, you know. I think that's the way it goes. Yeah, and I think so too. I think Webley Boost there says, I assume God would rather we solved our own problems and found truth by ourselves. I think so too. I think that's the test for us. Are we prepared to suffer ourselves for the truth? That's, I think, what real Christianity is. And so that's why I think that, you know, either I'm not a Christian or most of the people who claim to be Christians are not, you know. Anyway, I don't care about names or labels for people. What I do care about is truth and justice. So anyway, look, that's my motivation here, and on with reading this here. So we here, he says, in Australia. So this is, I better read who this is from. The Internet Review of Final Judgment by the Australia-based JFK assassination group. Probable Cause is their name. The review also gave Final Judgment a 3-star rating. Out of a possible 4 stars. Okay. Well, I wish they would have given him 5 out of possible 4, but maybe they've good reason for giving him a 75% rating. So he says, we in Australia believe that all theories on the JFK assassination should be heard, no matter whether you agree with them or not. Heck, we even bought and read Gerald Posner's Case Closed. Yeah, so you can guess with the name like Posner that he was like, no, nothing to see here. No, it definitely wasn't us. So case closed. It was Lee Harvey Oswald. Bye. And anybody who thinks any different is crazy. So he says, heck, we even bought and read Gerald Posner's Case Closed. And there isn't a more outlandish theory than his. Trying to get another book banned because you don't agree with it, or it isn't politically correct, the greatest censorship drive of the 80s and 90s, is just the kind of thing we fight against. It's just the same as groups such as the FBI and CIA redacting He has in air quotes, redacting lines of text here and there. People in glass theories, because I take it he means redacting. Redacting is not redacting. It's just another word to make it censoring sound nice. Or hiding the truth. So he says, people in glass theories shouldn't throw books, so to speak. Okay. So we here at Probable Cause are proud to review Final Judgment and hope that we never go down the path of the American model, he has in quotes. Freedom of speech and the First Amendment and all that, yeah, okay, until you start speaking out and stepping on other people's toes. They line you up for a takedown. Boy, does Michael Collins Piper know about that. So that's it as well. I mean, sorry to say, Americans, so many Americans, when they hear what's going on in Europe or in UK or Canada or Australia or Ireland or South Africa or wherever, other places supposedly in the Western world where we cherish democracy, so-called, or freedom of speech, so-called, and all this sort of stuff. So many of people in America, you often hear them say, oh, police knocking on your door at 2 a.m. for a tweet. Pity you don't have freedom of speech because you have a monarchy, or you don't have a proper constitution, or you don't have a proper Bill of Rights. Or they say, should have kept your guns, or whatever, because, the First Amendment is supported by the Second Amendment, or backed up by the threat of usage of the Second Amendment. But I think a lot of people are realizing as well, none of it makes a difference. They'll just declare you mentally unfit, or they'll say you're suffering from PTSD because you were a member of the military before and therefore you can't have guns, or you're a security risk, or you've got a mental problem and so you've got too many red flags against you. They'll take your guns that way. And I know so many people say, yes, come and take them, but they do. Most people do get taken down. But it's even more simple than that. With the point of view, or the idea that Americans have freedom of speech, only until you say things that they really don't want you to say, and they will find some way of circumventing the law or using spurious legal reasons to tie you up, at the very least in the process of lawfare, and they'll make a pauper out of you. They'll make you unemployable. They'll make life so difficult for you. Most people just do not have the heart or the perseverance to go through with all of it, and a lot of people will, even though they never would have thought they would, they'll say, "Oh, just let me make a public apology and go through a humiliation ritual, and I'll, say I was wrong," and all this sort of stuff. So that's what it boils down to, even though I know you hear a lot of people talk big, but that's what happens, So in name only do Americans have freedom of speech. And as George Bush, I suppose, was helpfully trying to point out to people, it is just a piece of paper. And unless people are very serious about exercising their rights, they lose their rights. And that is what has happened. The old Judeo-Christianity there, as Wobbly Boost talks about, yeah. And look, it simply is a historical case. It's fact that Christianity, whatever it became in the modern church, when Constantine, Emperor Constantine, decided to become the first pope, more or less, I think that was a case of him saying, if I can't beat it, I'm going to be in charge of it. And I think up until that point, it was just another schism of whatever. Modern Judaism is only since, as far as I understand it, a couple of centuries or maybe 4 centuries old. So whatever it was, all those Middle Eastern type of worships or practices or ritualistic practices were, Christianity leading up to whatever it evolved into in the 3rd and 4th centuries, it was just another schism of that anyway. Another faction, folding out of it. But anyway, look, I shouldn't go down that tangent too much anyway, anyhow, so he says, okay, after that little editorial, what is Final Judgment about? Piper's thesis is that Israel's intelligence agency, the Mossad, played a key role in the assassination alongside the CIA and organised crime. Throughout his presidency, JFK was involved in an increasingly bitter behind-the-scenes dispute with Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion over Israel's steadfast determination to build a nuclear arsenal. JFK wanted them to stop, but they had other ideas. Sounds far-fetched? Well, actually, you'll be surprised how many well-known JFK assassination players, he's got that phrase in quotes, JFK assassination players, have links to the Mossad. And we were quite impressed with the documented evidence within the book. Still, you will have to read this one for yourself to decide. Piper is under attack from the ADL in the United States for this book, and really, it's not warranted. Did the French community in the US get upset when it was suggested that there was a French connection to the assassination? No. But then again, perhaps they don't have the lobbying power of the ADL. No, well, you never heard of the Frey Pack or the FR Pack? And for good reason, because if they do exist, they haven't bribed and blackmailed sufficient politicians or politicians sufficiently in the US. So as I say, that was the internet review of Final Judgement by the Australia-based JFK assassination group called Probable Cause. Right, there's more reviews here, and is it worth reading? I think it is, yes, several different people. I think it is worth reading these. I'll carry on maybe for another half hour or thereabouts. Here's what some big names have said about America's #1 banned book. It's always good, of course, to be able to call yourself the #1 banned anything, isn't it? Piques people's interest. So a respected former high-ranking US State Department official says, and this is a bit of a long one here, as one who has read over 200 books on the JFK assassination and engaged in research both as an individual and as part of various teams, I can say without fear of contradiction that Piper's book is now the definitive work on the JFK assassination. Final Judgement is the most thorough, most honest, most penetrating, most factual, and most analytically complete and systematic of all that I have read so far. Who is this guy? Herbert L. Calhoun. The author builds an upwardly spiraling tapestry of well-documented facts that connect the threads of the conspiracy as they ascend level by level, from the ground up to the very tip of the pyramid. Along the way, he breaks the conspiracy into easily digestible parts. Otherwise, its sheer complexity would be nearly impossible to follow and decipher. At each level, the threads of the puzzle are woven together in such a way that the fog from the labyrinth is slowly but inexorably lifted until eventually it is peeled back completely, and the outlines of the conspiracy are laid bare. Well, that language there very much reminds me of James Shelby Downard as well, in his King Kill 33. What is revealed, and Michael Hoffman as well, what is revealed is as convincing as it is scary. Someday, America will have to face some unpleasant truths about its democracy and about how it has been and continues to be manipulated, if not completely commandeered by those whose primary loyalties lie elsewhere. Well, we all know where that is, don't we? Maybe there's some discussion to be had on that. Maybe it's not exactly Israel. Maybe it's more diffused like that. It's a global. It's not just Israel, because Israel has only existed technically since 1948, you know. It's whatever has existed for centuries, millennia even. Anyway, while the links at some of the levels may be tenuous, the author refuses to fake or fudge the data, or to be fatally selective in what is included or left out, as was so clearly the case in Gerald Posner's Case Closed, or indeed as was the case in the Warren Commission's own flawed report. Now maybe I was wrong in my guess there about Gerald Posner's Case Closed. I'll have to skim through that as well. Piper is intrepid in following his analysis to every logical conclusion, wherever they lead, and whatever the implications may be. Alan Hargreaves there says, think of all the names like Wells, H.G. and John Wells. Yeah. Was he one as well? He was certainly a magician of sorts anyway. H.G. Wells. So yeah, I mean, as well, even if we would say the name of a country like Israel or the US or Germany would do this, or France would do that, or Australia would do this, like, we can tell that the prime ministers or the presidents of those nations, they're not in charge of anything either. And I think even though, like, Bibi Netanyahu might, be ostensibly being treated as though he was a visiting emperor when he arrives in the United States Congress or Senate, and it certainly looks as if he's got a hold over Donald Trump, I think a lot of us would probably understand or know instinctively that he's not the top guy either. That there are people in charge that we'll never get to know their names of, maybe, or maybe never get to see. And I'm prepared to believe that there's something at the very tippity top that might not be human. I don't know whether it's an alien. I don't know whether it's a spectre or a ghost or something ethereal or the devil or whatever. Something at the very, very high up above the pyramid, or maybe it's something that shines on the capstone. I don't know. But anyway, it's, even if you're not superstitious or religious, and I don't think I am, I think it's useful as a metaphor, or at least a placeholder for whatever it is, an entity that's there, But if you talk in terms of geopolitics, I think it doesn't serve us well to talk about the names of nation states as though they are individual actors or entities that have a singular consciousness, that act in their own instance, because there's people behind it. And who are those people? And oftentimes it's the same people who belong to the same global institutions. So then you sort of say to yourself, like, what are we talking about? That, if Israel does this, the US will do that. Or Israel, as you hear now still with these guys who are whistleblowers, talk about how Israel and the US have shared objectives or shared goals or common interests or this kind of thing. And you're going to go, well, who exactly has the common interests? It's the same people anyway. So why are we talking about America and Israel having shared interests or common goals? Because it's the same sort of board of directors on both anyway. So what the hell are we talking about here, And I think that only serves to sort of sometimes distract us from the real reasons behind things. Now, I hope I'm still online on YouTube. If I'm not, this should be still going to Odyssey anyway. Anyway, I'll continue reading. Hopefully I'll see a comment or two as it goes on. I'll go for another 15-20 minutes. I'll see how it goes here now. Right, so yeah, where did I get to? Okay, so Piper is intrepid in following his analysis to every logical conclusion, wherever they lead and whatever the implications may be. In short, Piper keeps his eye on the donut, or the big picture, and not on the whole, the inessential details. He focuses on the why and how of the conspiracy, and unmistakably the threads all lead back to Israel, Israeli super patriots, the Meyer Lansky-led Jewish branch of the mob, and the Mossad, and the international agents of influence under its control. Chris Earhart says, you're good. Okay, so thanks, still live. While serious researchers may quibble with inessential details in the study, such as tenuous links at some level or redundancies at others, those of us who have studied this issue, since the days after the assassination always knew that the truth would have its own resonance, as in, something that is resounding or has a type of tuning fork resonance, that kind of way. RESONANCE. I don't know why I feel I'm pronouncing it wrong. Like the Garrison investigation did. We knew that the truth would have its own context, its own smell, like Peter Dale Scott's Deep Politics and the Death of JFK did. That's the title there. Deep Politics and the Death of JFK by Peter Dale Scott. Piper's book has them all, and in the Piper's book has them all, and in the grand tradition of Carl Oglesby's The Yankee and Cowboy War, Michael Collins Piper has struck gold. He has hit the mother lode, and in the process has pointed the finger at, if not tightened the proverbial noose around, the necks of the cabal of conspirators responsible for pulling the strings and triggers of the JFK assassination. JFK assassination research has a new standard bearer. It will never be the same again. Because of this book, future research will begin to focus more on the big picture and turn away from constantly grinding ad nauseum at inconsistencies in the Warren Commission's report. Compared to Posner's Case Closed, Final Judgment is a masterpiece. So that's Herbert L. Calhoun. Okay, that's a great review there. Herbert L. Calhoun, PhD, retired as Deputy Division Chief of the Policy Plans and Analysis Office of the State Department's Bureau of Political Military Affairs, and formerly served as a Senior Foreign Affairs Specialist for the U.S. Arms Control and Disarmament Agency, as the U.S. representative to the 1996 and 1998 United Nations Group of Governmental Experts on Small Arms and Light Weapons. Dr. Calhoun posted this endorsement of Final Judgment on Amazon.com on March 10th, 2003. That's brilliant. I'm very glad that it is archived within this PDF here, or within this sixth and second amendment of the sixth, maybe, and final, possibly, version of this book. Fantastic. Here's another review now. A famed Hollywood screenwriter and victim of the witch hunts of the 1950s, Michael Collins Piper has laid out the only scenario for the JFK assassination that makes ultimate sense. He's a gutsy guy who hasn't been afraid to confront the truth head on. That's what America is all about. Final Judgment is a masterpiece that would make a great film, but it is not likely that one will ever be made. That's Bill Norton. Christian and Resurrection says Israel is king of the East. Yeah. It was the name then that supposedly that Yahweh gave to Jacob after Jacob wrestled with God. And there is that also very interesting that if you say Israel might stand for Isis, Ra, and just Elohim or El or whatever. I think that's interesting as well, even if it is only a coincidence. So Bill Norton, anyway, one of the movie industry's most prolific screenwriters, the colourful Bill Norton, was described by the Sunday World of London, Sunday Papers, Sunday Magazine of London, on April 9th, 2000, as a leading Hollywood movie figure, and a dedicated socialist and a man with strong religious beliefs who had helped various left-wing causes. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, Norton was a hostile witness during the infamous anti-communist witch hunts on the House Un-American Activities Committee. But look, I think we would say from our perspective, looking back now, that if they're trying to characterize them as, witch hunts, as in like superstitious people going after commies that didn't exist, persecuting innocent people who just happen to be socialist or left wing, or people of just a political affiliation looking for reds under the bed, that Joe Carthy, turns out, he was right. And the reason the media attacked him and painted him as a crazy crackpot who was persecuting people for no reason is because the media was owned by these same guys, as we know. As was already spelled out earlier in this live stream here from what we read too. The the only publication was called the American Free Press, aptly named, that would even mention this book or review it in any way. Here's another review here from William J. Gill, a respected veteran American author, journalist, and Foundation official. I think you've pinned the tail on the donkey. In my estimation, Final Judgement ranks as the most important book of the 20th century. Wow. Gill, who died just as this edition of Final Judgement was going to press, was the author of such books as Trade Wars Against America, The Ordeal of Otto Otepka, Suite 3505, that's OTTOOTEPKA, Suite 305, The Story of the Draft Goldwater Movement and Why Reagan Won. A journalist with United Press International and the Pittsburgh Press, Gill also wrote for Life, Fortune and Saturday Evening Post, Reader's Digest and National Geographic. Wow. He also served as executive director of the prestigious Allegheny, that's ALLEGHENY, Allegheny Foundation, and was a well-known Washington representative for the domestic steel industry. Wow. A former top-ranking Pentagon official, Colonel Don de Grand Pré, or de Grand Prix, DONNDEGRANDPRE. So here's what Colonel Don de Grand Prix has written in his own book, Barbarians Inside the Gates, citing Final Judgement, which Grand Prix describes as brilliant. Several high-level military officers believed that the killing of JFK was in fact a coup d'etat. What's another way of saying a coup d'etat? Military insurrection, or a takeover of the state, carried out by elements of the CIA working with the Israeli Mossad. Kennedy was attempting to halt the development of nuclear weapons by the Israelis while simultaneously planning to disband the CIA and disengage our military troops from the Indochina area. Read Final Judgement, he must have said in his book, by Michael Collins Piper for more details. A veteran of World War II and Korea, Grand Prix served as Deputy Chief of the International Division or Office of the Chief of Research and Development at the Pentagon. In 1965, Grand Prix was named as Director for Ground Weapons Systems in the newly created Office of International Logistics Negotiations, responsible for negotiating sales contracts with heads of foreign nations for military weapons systems. On September 30th, 1979, the Washington Post magazine wrote about Grand Prix, citing his expertise. If you had been a Middle Eastern ruler in the 1970s in search of American weapons systems, you would have called Don de Grand Prix Pentagon arms peddler. Again, I mean, look, Washington Post, of all of the newspapers, I think... Oh, wait a minute. I'm confused. There's two Washington papers. Is the Washington Times and the Washington Post? Yeah, I think the Washington Times calls itself the newspaper of record and is much more, let's say, controlled or left-leaning or politically correct, whereas isn't it true that Washington Post actually prints some stories that are kind of more true-ish, or they're not totally, politically correct? I don't know, but maybe they're still controlled and they would try to paint a guy like this as being a bad guy, a Pentagon arms peddler. I don't know. Anyway, here's another one. Brian Downing-Quigg, another review here. One of America's most hard-driving young independent investigative reporters, shortly before his strange death in Phoenix, Arizona. And of course, right, this is one of the places that James Shelby Downard and William Grimstad and Michael Hoffman looked at. Close enough to, if not right on the line of latitude at 33 degrees. Of course, it's named Phoenix, so Masonic and everything. So if people, go to die there, they go west, which is a way of going to die and be resurrected. Maybe, who knows? So it's a place name full of portent. Anyway, shortly before his strange death in Phoenix, Arizona on June 16th, 2003, journalist Brian Downing Quigg wrote, and that's Quig, wrote to Michael Collins Piper and said, "A very important person gave me your book. So I started to read what I would not have purchased at a dollar book sale. I was hostile to the thesis stated on your cover, but I looked at the photos and then read every word. I am now convinced that you have seen, and now help others see, the largest feature of the JFK assassination that has been missed by all up to this period. I think that Final Judgment delivers all that you promise." Quigg was best known for his inquiries into the death of reporter Don Bolles, or Bolles, Bolles, and later for his work on the Charles Keating scandal. So maybe Brian Downing Quigg was a legitimate journalist who maybe was taken off the chessboard if certain people got wind of the fact that he was impressed by this book and he might give it the publicity they definitely didn't want it to have. Alan, you're saying John had his head cut off. Which John are you talking about now? You're not talking about me? I'm still... I'm going to guess I'm still alive. I try not to be too paranoid about that. Okay. Maybe you're just talking about JFK, I don't know. So I'll carry on here. Here's what famed American populist historian, maybe he saved the best review for last, or who he feels is somebody he admires the most, maybe. Another man who was... you're talking about John the Baptist. Okay, yeah. So Eustace Mullins, of course, he was, besmirched, blackened, had his name sullied with the awful, terrible, I was going to say moniker or criticism of being a staunch anti-Semitist as well, right? Anti-Semite. So Eustace Mullins, and wrote so many brilliant books about... I think he might have started off with like the economic books, was he? About how central banking is criminal and all the tricks of that and everything as well. So they definitely didn't like him. Anyway, here's the review from Eustace Mullins. Here's what he says about Final Judgment. "Only once in a decade does a book appear which immediately becomes a must-read for all concerned patriots. Final Judgment is such a book. Or Final Judgment is such a book. Final Judgment is a must book because it raises and answers so many questions which we need to know about. You need to know everything in this book if you are to understand the subversive forces which are destroying our nation." All of our nations, really. "Final Judgment is ammunition for the coming war of liberation for America." Are we in that war now? Does it feel like a war of liberation? Maybe if the tide ever turns. "Victory is not possible without information, and this book has given us the information we need. You will wait a long time, if ever, before you see such a gargantuan assembly of vital information as you'll find in this book. Final Judgment, the one book that, if read by enough people, will turn American politics upside down." Yeah. So I'm debating now whether to read on or whether to leave it there. We're coming up on 2 hours now, so I might leave it there and just kind of decide then before doing another one. I might try and do another one tomorrow, episode 3 tomorrow, and read the rest of this here. Pick up from The Myth of Dallas, New Revelations tomorrow. Christian Resurrection says the name Kennedy means misshapen head in Irish. Yeah. Now, funnily enough, this is something I actually have that in a video there, and I will put a pinned comment on this one, and I'll link to my videos that I did later on after the stream. Once it kind of allows you to comment after the stream ends, and you can have a look at these things. And it's in King Kill 33, and I think it's also in the foreword maybe that Michael Hoffman writes about or before King Kill 33, and I think in other publications that he wrote, and maybe the all three of them, because they all did collaborate, William Grimstad as well. And I think it's a bit of a stretch. It doesn't have to be, but I think it's it's legitimate enough. Now, certainly, there's a lot of coincidences, but it's all just nice to have. It doesn't prove anything, nor is it necessary for the proof to be there. But Kennedy in Irish is, and in Scots Gaelic very similar, is Céadach. And it takes, so it's C-I or C-E-A-N-N or C-I-N-N. So yeah, Cian, or that, however way you'd want to spell it, C-E-A-N-N or C-I-N-N. Yeah, that is head, Cian, but you pronounce Kennedy as Céadach. So it requires sort of separating Céadach into Cian and then Éadach, E-A-D-A-C-H. And you can do that in any language, I think, and in English I do it all the time. So I think it is legitimate. It's sort of like breaking down a word into smaller syllables that are themselves like building block words. So I think it is kind of true, but it's a little bit of a stretch. And Éadach, I think, means, I remember looking it up before, it's not a word that is, I'd say, common in Irish, or that I would be familiar with anyway. Not that I'm a fluent Irish speaker, certainly not at all, just from whatever you learn in school growing up. But Éadach, something like a sore head, I think I remember seeing it being translated as, which then if you kind of think laterally, you kind of go, oh, okay, so he got a sore head from being shot in the head, and maybe there's an alternate translation as either misshapen or whatever, So E-A-D-A-C-H, so it could be that it ties in with isn't it ironic that he died by being shot in the head? So yeah, fair enough. But it is mentioned in that video that I did anyway. But it was only a video of the work of Michael Hoffman, I think it was, and then of a little bit of King Kill 33. I had intended to do the whole lot, but got distracted with kind of getting into the finer points of it. Anyway, I'll link those in the pinned comment, I think, later, if you're interested to look at those. So look, I think I will. We've come up in 2 hours there. I think I will leave it at that. And you'll see all the connections there, like to, Neptune, and what I like is that the road that they came down, they passed the Majestic Theatre. And I think the Majestic might be number 33 on that street. And the street that it's on is Elm Street. So it's a nightmare on Elm Street, and all these things that I'd never thought were, because you hear of Dealey Plaza, but you never hear of Elm Street. I'd heard, of course, of Freddy Krueger and Nightmare on Elm Street, as a teenager, like in a horror movie and too scary to watch and all this. But I don't think I'd ever heard, but it was probably just my ignorance, that Elm Street was the road that led into Dealey Plaza. But I don't think it's something they mention that often, but anyway. Yeah, as you say, Alan, orchestrated, and in a very Kabbalistic ritual way, where all the names of everything do mean things. And I think as well, they like to set out all this. It's all part of a sort of a satanic ritual. But I think when people like us, or all of these conspiracy researchers look into this stuff, they kind of, if you say this stuff to normies, they'd kind of go, all right, you're definitely crazy. I mean, you need to be straitjacketed and put into a mental institution if you think that his name, Kennedy in Irish, if you split it into two words, it means broken head or ugly head or misshapen head or headache or this kind of thing. And therefore that proves something about the assassination. Obviously you sound like a crackpot, but look, I think there's something maybe different in 10% of us, that we are interested in these things and we go looking at everything and we enjoy a good mystery as well, and there is something exciting about it. But there's a tendency as well to get lost in all the details and to be fascinated by them and fixate on them. And we have to, I think, learn to rein ourselves in a little bit and focus on not the how of things necessarily, but the who. The who is behind it. And if these little details are helpful in pointing to the who, and I believe that they are, that's where we should remind ourselves, pull back a little bit and remind ourselves to focus on who's always at the bottom of these rabbit holes and how the T always becomes silent at the end. So I will leave it at that, because that's 2 hours, and I think it's maybe a length that's, around about good enough whereby people will listen back to it as well, maybe in a sort of a podcast type format. And I'll try and do, as I say, another one of these before too long. If not tomorrow, I plan on doing regular ones of these on this book before and leading up to November 22nd. All right, I'll end the stream now, and thanks to everybody for listening live and to anybody who listens on the playback. Cheers.